What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Dexion the Gamer, and today I'm going to be taking a chance and reviewing Samson, a new PC title that just got released. And this title is a not so ambitious title. It's from a smaller AA development team, and that's also reflected in the price. And I do actually like these kind of games because they can use Unreal Engine 5, even though we know it's UE5, so we accept the traditional things that come with UE5. But it's about 10 to 12 hours of single player campaign, and it's not overly ambitious. It's not trying to tackle Grand Theft Auto or anything like that. So without further ado, let's get into our settings here. We're going to be playing at 4K, and let me just turn off frame gen right now. Is doing some testing off screen, making sure our reflex is enabled, and we're going to be playing at the quality preset. All right, so without further ado, let's get into some game. Also, really quickly, for your games, if you use DLSS Swapper, this is how you can force the presets that you want to use on DLSS. As you can see, I'm selecting version 310.6, which is the latest one. So I'm just switching everything up to the latest DLL. You got super resolution, frame gen, ray reconstruction. And then if you go over to the right side here, you select DLSS presets, just use Nvidia recommended, and that will make performance M and ultra performance preset L. Alright, so starting out in the beginning zone here, looks like we're getting about 60 to 70 frames per second. Now, this being a Unreal Engine 5 game, this does feature the Lumen and also Nanite, and the Lumen is hardware, so it is using hardware accelerated ray tracing for global illumination as well as reflections. Not sure about shadows, but at least RTGI and reflections. And so usually you will see about 60 frames per second average in an Unreal Engine 5 game using the copy pasta Lumen and Nanite. Oh, got some roaches there, man. I'm gonna have to get rid of them suckers. At least they're not German roaches, then you'd be screwed. Anyway, so let's go out, just take a look outdoors and get some fresh air. Frame rate still looks to be around the same in the 60s. And then we're going to just make our way downstairs and take a look at the car, look at the NPCs. This really does look like a typical Brooklyn apartment though. And I like how you can even hear the sounds of people screaming in the background and dogs barking in other apartments. It looks like the 90s to a T. I actually grew up in New York City in the 90s. I grew up in the Bronx. And this really does look like that area.
Welcome home.
Alright, so taking our first steps on the street here. Maintaining around that 60-ish frame rate. Probably peaks up at about 70. And again, this is on DLAA, preset K. Latency is at about 56 milliseconds, 54 there, 57. So in the mid 50s. Yeah, these NPCs leave a lot to be desired. I'll just leave it at that. A lot of them look the same, and they're just rehashed. But you know what? It's a budget game. It wasn't made by a multi-million dollar dev team.
Oh, not good.
Alright, so it does look like you can harass these NPCs here at least. And that guy looked like he was seriously on some crack, which would not be surprising in the 90s. Alright, so once we are in the car, it looks like the frame rate pretty much stays the same. I did see it dip down into the 50s for just a second there. And we're going to be using DLSS quality to see what kind of boost in frame rate that gives to us, and to see if that changes image quality. And let's get our overlay back up here. So now we are getting in the 90s as far as frame rates, and that's not bad. That's a good 60% boost above what we had before, and this would be a great starting point to apply frame generation on top of the image. But let's just continue to see how this fares at DLSS quality. And again, this is preset K. A cool little mud effect there. That was pretty good. To little attention to detail there. Yeah, the graphics look really good in this game. So, at least they pull that off. It's definitely not a GTA game with as far as physics and NPC interactions and things of that nature. But, it was never meant to live up to that standard. All right, changing it over to the balance setting will give you an additional maybe 8 to 10 frames per second. Not really a huge amount, but it will at least get you closer to 100 frames per second without having to use frame generation. Latency drops down to in the mid 40 millisecond range, so it is a little bit more responsive, and we're holding a 90 average frames per second, a little bit more. And this game does have a little bit of stuttering, but they did just release a patch on day one, and they said that they did address some stuttering issues, and this is actually slightly older footage. But in any case, we are now using DLSS performance using preset M, and I will provide the receipt for that a little bit later. Basically, there is a mode in DLSS Swapper that you just check off, and you'll be able to see an overlay at the bottom of your screen verifying which preset that you're using to render using DLSS. Sometimes the Nvidia app won't recognize the game as it does not support overrides at this time, so you will have to use the newest DLL and use DLSS Swapper to set the Nvidia recommended. So anyways, we are holding a pretty steady image, a little bit of a little less stability on like the power lines and things of that nature, but as you are moving in a pretty quick motion here, those are always hard to keep straight, but they don't look distracting. And performance is getting closer to 100 frames per second now on average. It's actually not that much of an improvement over balanced, and that's probably because preset M is a heavier model to run. So between preset M and preset K, you probably might get a slightly sharper image out of preset M, and that might be something worth it to you. Alright, so now we're going to be using frame generation 2x mode on top of our native performance here. I will just confirm that by hitting the square. Okay, just give it a minute for it to kick in there, and the frame rates are now at the 120 hertz refresh rate, and that's very good territory to be at for 4K. And latency actually surprisingly looks like it went down. I'm not sure if that's possible, how that's possible. Usually frame generation adds latency, it doesn't decrease it. But I'm pretty sure I had reflex enabled before I enabled frame generation. And it looks really stable. I'm not seeing any crazy ghosting or shimmering artifacts. So I don't know how they did it, but in this game, frame generation is just pure magic. And now we are going to 2x mode on the quality DLSS setting, and that's able to bump us up until the 148-ish frames per second, getting to 150s there. Really good experience. This is where you want to be at if you have a 160 or 165 hertz monitor. It'll get really good response time. Latency is still in the 40s. It just dipped down to 39 milliseconds for a second there, 40 milliseconds. GPU power right now is just hovering around 290 to 300 watts, so that's going to keep you really cool in the summer. And no artifacts. I don't see any clipping, any sizzling, or any like swimming of textures, dithering artifacts, anything else like that. So this is definitely a win-win situation here. Frame time graph looking pretty decent as well, for a UE5 game. So, for what it's worth. Alright, so lastly here we're going to do DLSS performance with 2x frame generation, and just to see how that looks like. And it looks like that actually did add a little bit of sharpness back into the image, so that's great. Latency now is really responsive, down in the high 20s and low 30 millisecond range. So this is definitely good if you want to have just an extra snappy performance, responsiveness feel to it, without losing any major deficits in image quality. Getting about 170 frames, 180 frames per second now, so this will get you closer to a 200 hertz refresh rate on those monitors, and really good experience so far. I'm kind of impressed. I will say that the CPU is hovering at about 50 to 60%, so this does look like it can be a CPU bound game if you don't have a beefy CPU like an X3D chip or like a 14900K or something like that. Alright, so let's just top out the frame rate to 4 times frame generation with DLSS performance, and it's looking pretty good. It's honestly looking pretty good. The reflections, I'm trying to see if they look a little deformed or anything like that, but I can't really. No, they still look pretty good. Everything is looking really smooth. You're getting a 300 frames per second, which is amazing, for those big 360 hertz monitors. Latency is really good. It's only around 34 milliseconds right now, 32, 33. So this is going to give you a really snappy experience. Usually with heavy ray tracing, you'll see about 40s to 50 millisecond range. But hey, if I don't know what this game did, how they implemented the new streamlined DLLs, or maybe Nvidia was just quietly working on frame gen in the background. But in this game, it's like magic frames, man. And now we're just taking it back to DLSS quality with 4 times frame generation, and we're getting about 280 frames per second. So this is it's 260 to 70 around there. So yeah, definitely great for the 240 bros, 240 in refresh rate bros and sisters out there. And latency is still really good. It's still at about mid 30s. So 4 times frame generation isn't even really adding a detrimental amount of input lag. And I think I might see it just maybe a little hint of an extra shimmer here and there, but it's definitely nothing distracting. I have to actually go out of my way to look for it. And lastly, I'm just going to do DLSS Native, so that's DLAA with 4 times frame generation, and still getting decent response time. The input latency is now at about 50 to 60 milliseconds, probably in the high 50s or in the mid 50s, and we're getting at about 170, 80 frames per second. So if you want to maintain the highest level of image quality and a really smooth frame rate experience, this is definitely an option here. What still amazes me is this is the same input lag that you would get at 60 frames per second using native without DLSS and without frame generation. I don't know how they did it. This is really something to be studied here. And lastly, we're going to be enabling ray reconstruction and just taking a look at the difference in frame rate and to see if we can notice any difference in image quality with it enabled. And I'm going to compare it to it being disabled. But before I do that, I want to take a look at the latency again just to make sure that they're not tricking us with the Nvidia reflex. So this is native with latency at about 55 milliseconds. Because some games they do that, they turn off reflex if you're not using frame generation, even if the menu says it's enabled. So I'm going to be testing that out really quickly here. Okay, let's go to video and hide the overlay. So yeah, that's reflex, so we're going to turn it off. So before we were getting 50s, and now we are getting 50, okay, 70s, 71, 73. Okay, so putting it back on, let's see here. Yeah, now it's down back to where it was. It's about 55 milliseconds. Oh, yeah, our frame gen in this game is magic frames. I don't know how they did it, man. I have no idea. This is absolutely crazy. I've never seen a situation where frame generation reduces your input latency. Once it kicks in, yeah, 48, 49. What? I'm just mystified. I'm just gonna go back to 4x mode really quickly here. Yeah, this is the input latency we were getting at native when the frame rate was just 60. And I'm gonna be honest, you can begin to see a little bit of artifacting at the 4x mode, especially. I tend to stick to 3x mode myself. Like when you turn the camera around, you can start to see a little sizzling going on, next to Samson's hair or the character's hair. And but I also do have screen tearing because I'm going past my monitor's refresh rate. But besides that, everything feels snappy. The shadows don't look weird. Running around doesn't look weird. It's not giving me any other kind of issue. This is quite the accomplishment. Okay, so I'm going to stop talking about these magical fake frames, and we're going to get on to our reconstruction comparison. Thanks again, guys, for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one. And without further ado, peace. I'm out.